You know what I love? A good iceberg. You know what I love more? Being incredibly late to a trend. I've been playing with this idea as of late, and finding that none actually existed, I decided to put together a Conan Exiles iceberg covering lore, fan theories and cut content. If you've somehow never seen an iceberg before, we start with fairly well known topics and things get more obscure as we go further down. So grab a coffee and get comfortable for this chilly expedition into the Arctic depths of Conan Exiles. We're starting off with a pretty simple one, and that is the Serpent Men twisting the minds of the Giant Kings against the Lemurians. This lore detail is mentioned and hinted at a couple of times in game and alludes to how the Serpent Men use the awakened staff of the Triumvirate to sow discourse amongst the ranks of the Giant Kings. The staff itself will keep up its friendly and helpful facade until some point after you visit the Well of Skelos, at which point the demon inside will finally tell you how he bent the will of the Giant Kings to that of the Serpent Men, all in the name of vengeance against the humans and King Kull of Atlantis. The Archivist, one of the Giant Kings of the Triumvirate, is something of an author. He's written a number of books in-game that can only be looted from the Archivist's assistant in the Warmaker's Sanctuary. These books include titles like The Prince of the Black Shores, The Mastodont's Tower, Time of the Scaled Lizard, etc. These books are all references to the works of Robert E. Howard, the creator of Conan the Barbarian. Many have theorised over the years that the Exiled Lands might be a prison, and it is indeed. When talking to Mek Kamoses, an exiled Black Ring sorcerer, he speaks of Totham Mon and his political alliances with King Sestafon of Stygia, loosely implying that Mek himself is a political prisoner shipped off to the Exiled Lands to basically get him out the way. There are other pieces of lore in game that bolster this assertion and indicate that Totham Mon may be courting the favour of more than just one king. On the surface level, the Purge just seems like a mechanic to present some extra challenge to exiles. However, the Purge are actually looting the Exiled Lands. Gilzan the Treasure Hunter, a relic hunter located in Sepameru, tells the player about the Purge. Not only do they arrive and slay anyone in their way, but their main purpose in the lands is to steal any relics they find, a process some call skimming. Who do they steal the relics for? Well, that is quite a detailed answer, something I'm working on a future lore video about. Being built on the foundation of Robert E. Howard's original works, you'd expect that Conan Exiles contains plenty of references to the books and the comics. That's true, but you can also find plenty of other references to other works. This includes titles from H.P. Lovecraft, Clark Ashton Smith, and even a line in one of the Giant King's lore stones that references the Ozymandias poem written by Percy Shelley. A lore stone in the summoning place indicates that the Giant Kings were vehemently opposed to the worship of Yog. As devout Setites, the lore stone warns their human slaves not to feed the Lord of the Empty Abodes, one of the many names for Yog-Sothoth. The reason given is that it becomes more powerful when fed, indicating that the Giant Kings want Yog to remain as weak as possible. Whether that is out of zealotry for Set or fear of Yog himself is still up for debate. The Kinscourge is the half-human, half-giant son of the Priest King. Known in life as Tyros, he is the only evidence in-game that humans and Giant Kings can mate, though various item descriptions hint that that birth may not have been natural. The item description of the Tears of Two Races outright states that it is unknown if his birth was natural or aided by sorcery. Unfortunately, this entry leaves more questions than answers, but with the Priest King's rituals in the summoning place, perhaps he reached out to demons beyond human comprehension to enable the birth. Warmaker Clail is the last living Giant King found deep in the Unnamed City. When you speak to him, he'll walk you through the history of the Giant Kings and the Exiled Lands. Something interesting is that the Warmaker seems very regretful about the events of the Lemurian War. He seems to show a hint of guilt about taking the Lemurians as slaves, and he shows even more about releasing the Sandstorm. He even mentions that the people regarded him as the Warmaker and that he simply did his duty, divorcing himself from the role and adding an empathetic tinge to an aspect of the Warmaker's character. It's fairly well known that in your fight with the Witch Queen, you're actually fighting Rasma of Shem. She's become possessed by the mask of the Witch Queen, causing her hostility towards you as you venture into the palace. The mask itself seems imbued with the soul of the Witch Queen. Many long-deceased characters exist as ghosts in the Exiled Lands, so perhaps the mask is the avarice for the Witch Queen to continue on in the mortal world. She wishes to rebuild her Lemurian empire but seems somewhat sympathetic. Her memories reveal a dark truth about the Lemurian War, and she somehow keeps Razma of Shem alive after we defeat her in a fight that would have killed any other mortal. Seeing as her soul has lasted for so long in the mask, perhaps it moves elsewhere once the mask is destroyed in the creation of the Keystone. This one is still kind of unresolved as the story is still in progress. In Age of Sorcery Chapter 1, sorcery was introduced into the world of Conan Exiles by Kurak, a mysterious sorcerer who has discovered a way to subvert the bracelet all exiles wear and enable them to cast sorceries. It's not yet clear how he's managed to do such a thing, but he has accrued quite a large cult during his exploits. I've seen various people make various different guesses, but this is one we won't most likely know for sure until Age of Sorcery Chapter 3. This is one some of the older players might remember. Crossbows used to be usable in Conan Exiles, though unfortunately they were removed a long time ago. As for why, it seems there are a few reasons. Some said they were incredibly overpowered, others said they weren't performing as intended in the combat rework, and a few even put it down to a consistent bug that Funcom couldn't fix. I haven't been able to find out a solid reason for sure, but you can still spawn the original crossbows in when you're using certain mods, though they are still very janky. Maybe they'll eventually get added back into the game in a future update. Deep in the frozen north is the camp of the Outcast. He's a blinded frost giant that seems far more intelligent than most and speaks of the true nature of the universe. He's a bit off the beaten path, so he's fairly easy to miss, but his dialogue is worth it. He makes references to H.P. Lovecraft, the adventures of Mark Twain, and basically tells you nothing is real and everything is a dream. Nihilism at its finest. According to the Conan Exiles wiki, the fight with the Kinscourge used to be quite different than he currently is. He previously used to use teleportation and explosive attacks in his fight, and perhaps this was removed from the game to better suit the intended difficulty of the fight. I've not been able to find any other information about this, which I assume I can put down to how many years ago these changes were made. As a side note, I also found on the wiki that the Kinscourge apparently has a hidden mechanic, where every ranged attack he uses will slowly increase in range. If you somehow manage to drag the fight out for between 30 minutes to an hour, the attack will eventually have enough range to AoE the entire room, though if you're fighting the Kinscourge for an hour, I'd say you have bigger problems. The Cimmerians at the Mounds of the Dead are strange folk, walking in a haze amongst the reanimated corpses of the mounds. Speaking to Braga, a Cimmerian in the nearby lake, he mentions that the Cimmerians in the mounds believe they've died and they are in Crom's afterlife, simply because it's foggy. Braga is a pretty funny character and takes great pleasure in ridiculing his kinfolk as idiots for not realising they're still alive. Deep in the Warmaker's sanctuary, just before you reach the Warmaker's arena, there's an ice wall with the silhouette of a gigantic yeti looming behind it. It's fairly easy to miss considering all the trash you'll have to fight on the way to the arena. The yeti inside, if you manage to no-clip in, is actually completely combat disabled. He's likely here to scare players, or to encourage them to try and find a way in, but alas, there is nothing to be gained here. The location of the exiled lands has long been a point of debate. The Isle of Siptar, on a few different maps I've seen now, is just southwest of Kemi on the coast of Stygia, but where is the exiled lands? I've seen many theories, but it is confirmed that the exiled lands doesn't canonically exist in the world of Conan the Barbarian. I believe this was a deliberate choice by the devs to help them carve out their own lore before delving into the pre-existing story, and looking at some of the maps, there's no real place it could be. For the sake of our sanity, we should probably just assume it's in some far-flung reaches of the world. Siptar is a weird place for a variety of reasons. Packed to the brim with eldritch monsters and remnants of the elder races, you may think it's just a chaotic hellhole, but there are some indications it may actually be a testing ground. The Migo of Yuggoth are present on the Isle and are specialists in surgery and neuroscience. Their presence, alongside the presence of their mutated human experiments, indicate they may be testing their various works on the Isle, seeing how they fare against the variety of humans and beasts present. Why? Well, that's anyone's guess. This entry refers to reports of inaccessible journey steps. Some have been reported in the past as bugged or otherwise broken at different times, but the penultimate journey step of Chapter 10 remains unable to be completed in the intended way. To finish this step, you'd have to defeat an enemy named the Mummy of the Ring at the Chaos Mouth, and retrieve the essence of the Serpent Ring of Set. This is impossible, as the Mummy of the Ring is cut content and therefore cannot be completed as intended. Throughout the lore of the Lemurian War, a major sticking point is the Lemurians using a powerful weapon to decimate the Giant King's armies and leave a crater that would become the Shattered Springs. This weapon has been described as a sorcery of some sort, though there is no information on exactly what sort of sorcery it is. The Lemurians do seem a bit more magical than the Exiles of the modern day, and thus they likely had access to incredibly powerful spells we could only dream of. However, the question of what exactly the sorcery was does remain unanswered. This entry refers to a small patch of flowers on Telis Island at a location named Imi's Cradle. It appears to be a grave of sorts, and when you listen closely, you can hear whispers from within. I've studied this for a little while. I've isolated the voice, played it backwards, played it forwards, sped it up, slowed it down, and I just cannot decode the whispers, and it seems many others have fallen at the same hurdle I have. Some fans theorise that the Kinscourge's wife, Telith, is buried here, which makes sense, though that still doesn't explain who Imi is, or why we cannot decipher the whispers. Back to our boy Braga near the Mounds of the Dead. In his long conversation about the nearby destinations, he mentions the tomb of the Barrow King. Of course, this is where we fight the resurrected Priest King and claim the diadem of the Giant Kings. However, Braga mentions that there was a dead man at the entrance who may have some tales to tell. Reaching the tomb, there is in fact no dead man present, only aggressive undead. That little tidbit of information from Braga is quite easily forgotten when you're fighting off all those undead. Perhaps this is cut content or just something that was never implemented, but I definitely want to know the stories of that ghost. This entry refers to a dialogue-enabled vulture found in the admin panel. This vulture can be spawned as normal and is able to be interacted with. However, the vulture does not have any dialogue, and thus unfortunately does not speak. I did a bit of research and I couldn't find anything about it, nor could I find anywhere where this vulture spawns naturally in-game. It also does not have a death animation when killed, and I believe it's likely the remains of a piece of cut content that was removed pretty early. The lava worm is a cut content NPC, presumably intended to be in the volcano. It has the same sounds and movements as the abyssal remnant, but is larger and breathes fire instead of poison. The worm was added into the admin panel during early access, but doesn't naturally spawn in-game. If you do spawn, kill and harvest it, you can loot the Staff of the Triumvirate and various abysmal pieces. The wiki also states it could at some point drop the essence of the Serpent Ring, though that doesn't seem to be the case anymore. Seeing as this enemy is indeed still in the admin panel after all these years, it's possible that it may be implemented somewhere eventually. The pontoon building set is a piece of cut content with very little information about it. It appears to be a very old design that I've only managed to find on the wiki, and it seems like it would have been a tier 2 structure designed to emulate a pirate-like feeling. There's no information on how it was crafted, but it required a resource called pontoon and insulated wood to repair. Whilst it's unclear when or if pontoon was available in-game, it has definitely been cut, and it looks like the set was used to inspire the Flotsam set that was added with the Isle of Siptar DLC. One of the in-game journey steps requires that you find what haunts the Sanctuary ruins located on Telith's Island. This journey step seems to complete when you find the ruins, but the description seems to hint that you should be finding a ghost that sings to you. Our boy Braga, again near the Mounds of the Dead, says similar, stating a ghost sung to him on the island. Now at first I didn't really think much of this, however I have also found some very old forum posts discussing if there was once a ghost of Telith in the Sanctuary ruins. Most users couldn't decide, but a few said they were certain the ghost was present at some point. I've not been able to find anything for certain either way, and Dennis, the lead designer, when I asked him, said that it predated his time with the team, so he wasn't aware. Either way, if it was indeed removed, nothing remains of the ghost in the admin panel. This one has bothered me for a while now, and I'd love to get a decisive answer on it. It's well known that the Kinscourge, Tyros the Deathbringer, fell in love with Telith and had a child named Zalthar. However, there is something more to this. If you read the description of the Tears of Two Races, it states that Tyros had children with Telith. Children as in plural. I do actually know more about this, but I'll be going into it in a future lore video. Much like how Siptar seems to be a testing site for the Mi-Go, it appears the exiled lands are something of just a playground for the outer gods. Many deities are worshipped and represented in the exiled lands, even smaller ones like Hanuman, or forgotten ones like Dagon have some sort of earthly influence. With the map's grim history of connection to the Outer Dark through the Giant Kings, and the encounters system adding more of that eldritch presence onto the exiled lands, it does seem at times that the map is just a playground for the whims of the Outer Gods. The Kinscourge had some related items in-game that appear to be cut content from early in development. There is an item named the Arena Ritual Offering, which describes Tyros as a full-blooded human and possible descendant of Kull of Atlantis. As you can imagine, when I found this while just randomly scrolling through the admin panel and read the description, I had a bit of a mini panic, as this would completely invalidate all the lore about the Kinscourge if it were true. However, fortunately, the recipe to make the Arena Ritual Offering requires Demon Bane, a potion that is impossible to get outside of the admin panel, and thus this makes the offering impossible to craft. The Demon's Bane doesn't even have an item description, so it was likely quickly scrapped a good while ago. Fortunately, this makes the lore cut content and thus not canon, otherwise that Kinscourge video I made would be completely wrong. Similar to the Sumerians in the Mounds of the Dead, I've seen many fan theories positing that the exiled lands are simply just a purgatory between life and death. There is some circumstantial evidence of this, including the fact the player cannot truly die, and they're rescued from circumstances that would otherwise kill anyone else. Now, this could be true, as the journey to craft the keystone and pass the cursed wall could be seen as a rite of passage to get into the afterlife. However, as fun as it is to theory craft with this idea, there is simply too much lore to back up the exiled lands being a real place that, as I mentioned earlier, simply acts as a prison. Finally, this is one I've only ever heard really small whispers of, and it's basically hearsay, so take it as you will. A few years ago, I had someone on Discord tell me they went past the northeastern curse wall many years ago in early access and found a grass plains-like environment there, as if it were ready to be expanded in the future. I've also heard this on a random forum before, though you might know I can't find that post anymore. There's no way to really confirm how true this is, though I'm willing to somewhat believe that it may have been the case when the East was first introduced, and the out-of-map topography was later changed to save memory or something technical like that. Of course, this could have just been somebody playing around with a mod they forgot they had on, or it could just be a misremembering. Again, there's no way to know for certain, but I don't know, I guess it's fun to think about. On the Age of Sorcery Chapter 2 dev stream, Dennis mentioned that a northeastern expansion isn't entirely out of the question, so at least hopefully one day we'll be able to venture beyond the Curse Wall and explore that area. And there we have it, my entire Conan Exiles Iceberg. Thanks for watching. I know I'm probably a few years late on the Iceberg trend, but I love a good iceberg, and I've never seen one for Conan Exiles, so I decided to make my own. I'll be honest, I've probably missed a lot of interesting stuff, so feel free to leave your own tidbits of information or theories in the comments below. If you enjoy my content, all the links to my Twitch, Twitter, Discord, Patreon, Host Havoc affiliate page, NordVPN discount and NordPass discount are available in the description below. However, of course, you can simply just leave a like, a comment or subscribe. Any of those are very greatly appreciated. Patrons get a bunch of nice benefits, including sneak peeks of videos, your name in every video, custom made wallpapers in 1080p and 4K resolutions, full-size build blueprints, Discord roles and more. That being said, a massive thanks to all of our esteemed coffee cultists on screen now for continuing to support the channel over on Patreon. Again, thanks for watching, take care, and I'll see you soon.